Continuing our coverage of a breaking story tonight, today's conviction of the Trump org for criminal tax fraud, conspiracy, and falsifying records is clearly a blow to Donald Trump's company, a legal and business fact, even as he tries to run for president. The conviction on all counts also a vindication for New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who assumed office earlier this year, led this prosecution. The DA of Manhattan almost always has a pretty full plate, but that's especially true right now as Bragg has been tackling crime, police reform, and, of course, high-profile probes like this one. Bragg has said before that no one is above the law.
This is the sort of work we do here at the District Attorney's Office each and every day, ensuring that when a Manhattanite hands over money, that it actually goes there without any smoke screens.
I led the team that held Trump and his children accountable for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation.
In Manhattan and in New York, you will be held accountable for defrauding donors.
I go where the facts go.
Well, today a jury found the facts, convicted the Trump Organization. Now, as is customary during a trial like this, Bragg largely demurred in public, let the prosecutors do the talking in court. Tonight, he's now doing his first interview since the verdict right here on MSNBC on the Beat. DA Alvin Bragg, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Ari.
What does this conviction mean?
It's consequential in a number of ways. First, we've got the former president's, namesake corporations being convicted, criminal convictions in contrast to prior civil matters. And the broader message, right? This was a case about cheating, lying, greed, the arguments you heard in the courtroom. So the message that you played in the lead in connection with the Steve Bannon case, which we brought in other white-collar matters, is that we have one standard of justice for all. We go where the facts take us, and we hold those accountable who engage in the kind of conduct that these organizations did.
You say you go where the facts are, and this is one of those interesting times where we had a witness on tonight, we had a pretty prominent attorney, but people were asking questions and making comments about why you've done what you've done with your power. So now you get to respond to what some of them raise and what you're familiar with, which is the legal question. If you can win this case against the Trump org, and you had all this evidence, why does it not lead to charging Donald Trump himself?
So, as I said back in April in a statement, the investigation's ongoing. This is one chapter. I cautioned people against reading ahead. We needed to focus on this and do what I thought the public servants in my office, a superb job they did in the courtroom. That was the focus. But as I said, the investigation's ongoing. There are other matters why that part of the team was in court, for the world to see and putting these facts out. We had other people back advancing the ball in other ways. So the investigation is ongoing.
Is this conviction the end of the story or a building block?
We follow the facts, and this is part of a broader piece of work that we've been doing really since I joined the office in January, and we're going to continue it. So obviously we paused today because this is quite consequential, a criminal conviction for the former president's namesake corporations, but the work continues. The work never stops. And we're going to continue to do that. And there may be, I don't know, I don't want to get ahead of the facts, but there may be other moments when we can report out publicly. In fact, I've committed to doing that when we reach a conclusion, whether that's by indictment or some other way of closing the investigation.
With regard to Mr. Trump?
With regard to Mr. Trump.
In the trial, I referenced this, and here's some reporting on it. One of your ADAs, so they're part of your strategy, in this now victorious case, argued at the close that Trump had, quote, personal knowledge of the tax cheating carried out by executives, the ADA pointing to a document, I think we have this, initialed by Trump, that he called, quote, explicit proof of knowing his execs were tinkering with expenses to reduce their taxes. If you have that in court and you chose, and it's your office, you stand behind it, of course, to introduce that in the trial, doesn't that look to someone like Trump was in on it?
So I'm going to say his name. ADA Steinglass made that argument, did a superb job throughout trial, along with Susan Hoffinger. And look, that argument was put to the jury and put very well. The defense, was raising and kind of, putting out there saying that, Trump was not, really trying to distance Trump from this. And so in rebuttal, we said, look, who hired these folks? What are their roles in the company? We're not talking about low level. We're talking about high managerial agents. who set the compensation structure? So that argument in the context of the trial was that the former president sanctioned this conduct. That's a different argument from whether or not he's criminally liable himself. But as I said, the investigation generally is ongoing.
What is the punishment for this conviction for the company? And what do you say to skeptics who look at this and say, wow, okay, you won on all counts legally. It's a big victory today. But skeptics say, is it really a big punishment, or do corporations just look at this as the cost of doing business when they get caught?
Right. So I heard your prior guests talk about Trump University and Trump Foundation. I was in senior leadership at the AG's office when we did those. I led the Trump Foundation work. Very, very important matters. They weren't criminal. A criminal conviction is of a different sort. So to answer your question, yes, it's a maximum penalty of $1.6 million. But consequences that flow, the chilling effect in the marketplace of having a criminal conviction, the message it sends to others, the general deterrence that we won't stand for this kind of cheating and lying and greed in Manhattan is all, I think, very, very important in and of itself. But as I said, it's also a chapter in a larger book and part of a broader investigation.
Your office is so powerful that when you hire someone, people start making interpretations of that. I want to give you the benefit, as we always try to do around here, to address the headlines, because maybe they're overwritten. But the Times had a big piece noting that you hired this DOJ veteran. Other folks have mentioned this. Does that mean that you're ramping up the Trump case when, at the same time, the other folks who your predecessor had brought on, DA Vance, had sort of left after the Trump case? Does this headline mean there is an escalation of the Trump case, or is that really overwritten?
What it means is we are a phenomenal office that attracts phenomenal talent. So Matthew Colangelo is a dear former colleague. We worked at the New York Attorney General's office together on many matters, including the Trump Foundation matter. He's coming in to help us on a broad range of matters. So
it's not a Trump thing?
Well, I would say, without committing exactly to, I'm not going to say any matter in particular he's working on, but a broad suite. So I think the focus in the last 24 hours has been almost exclusively on Trump. But this is someone who's multifaceted. So he was the chief of staff to Tom Perez when he was the labor secretary. He was at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund doing affordable housing litigation. Senior, not just once, but twice in the Department of Justice, helping oversee antitrust, tax, the civil division, and civil rights. So he's going to help us in a number of ways. And that's going to include our most sensitive white-collar investigations.
And you're here on a big win. I mean, there's no way to argue. This was a huge victory, and it's a victory that other prosecutors have not reached when you look at holding this company accountable. I wish I had you here every week. You make news. I want to turn to just a couple other quick things while I have you, though. Crime is a challenge across the country. New York City is a big place, so it becomes kind of a symbol for that. What type of crime is rising in New York? Why is it rising? And where does that fit in with the commitment you've made, which is to be a prosecutor who does deal with violent crime and guns, but also is trying to reform some of what you, as a candidate, called the kind of over-policing?
So let me start with the violent crime. Very, very importantly, year to date, homicides in New York City are down. They're down even further in Manhattan. And shootings year to date are down citywide and they're down even further in Manhattan. Like you said, we've been focusing like a laser on those who drive violence. There's a very small percentage of the population that does that kind of violent crime. We've been focusing, working with state and federal partners on gun trafficking, ghost guns, and all those things are helping to drive those numbers down. So I think that's an important message that doesn't get talked about enough. Look, certainly there are other issues that we need to continue to work on guns as well. Other issues that we need to drive down and get back to pre-pandemic levels. I mean, we still are, coming out of so much dislocation, and we're seeing it. So we have other initiatives. We're focusing, as you point to, reform. We're focusing on in our office. We've really deepened our mental health supports for alternatives to incarceration. Really, we see a lot of criminal conduct that's the result of distress. In trying to really reduce recidivism and increase public safety by connecting people to, for example, mental health services. I mean, I know you walk around Manhattan and see these issues like I do. And so that's just one example, as you mentioned reform.
You look at Rikers Island, something we've covered. A lot of people who've looked at the issue say this is a broken prison. It's one of the largest facilities in the United States, broken jail. It's something that your agenda has been critical of. Mayor Adams initially said that maybe they would try to close it. Now he says no. The last Democratic mayor said they'd try to close it, but they didn't. Now, in fairness, I was trying to be fair with guests. You don't have a magic wand that controls that. There's a larger system there. But as a prosecutor of this big city, is Rikers fundamentally broken? Is it fixable? Do you have to make change there?
I mean, there's no doubt that Rikers is a significant humanitarian issue. I mean, we had a training over the summer for all of our assistant district attorneys with the Board of Correction, really to highlight the conditions so they would know when they're making a bail application, they would know where someone is going. That's one of the reasons we've been scaling up our alternatives to incarceration and using other ways. I'll tell people all the time, we need a middle lane, right? We have with Rikers and we have being out in the community. And in particularly in the mental health space, we need infrastructure. We need a place where we can have people get those supports. And I approach that, as we've talked about before, through a social justice lens, of course. But I'm also a career prosecutor. I've been doing this 20 plus years. It's a fundamental public safety issue. We're not going to get to reduce recidivism and get enduring public safety if we don't address substance use disorder, we don't address mental health, and we don't put this in the context of, the 1 in 100-year phenomenon that we've been going through the last couple of years.
Yeah. District Attorney Alvin Bragg on the Big News Night. I appreciate you coming on the program.
Thanks for having me on.